What do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid? What's wrong with actually understanding what this bill does?
That is North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis in the Senate chamber condemning President Trump's big, beautiful bill, specifically the portion that cuts billions of dollars in Medicaid. Lawmakers are expected to vote on the president's bill this week, with many Republicans hoping to get the bill to the president's desk before the 4th of July. Senator Tillis' comments on the bill come shortly after he announced that he will not seek re-election in 2026, opening the door now for one of the most competitive congressional races in next year's midterms. Joining us this morning, Dr. Chris Cooper, friend of the show, political science professor at Western Carolina University. Chris, good morning. Good Monday. How about this? All right, first of all, were you surprised by this senator's announcement, and why on a Sunday?
Yeah, look, I was surprised. And frankly, I think anybody who says they weren't surprised is selling you a bill of goods. I don't think anybody really saw this coming. As far as why on a Sunday, I don't know, I have to ask Thom Tillis himself, but my best guess is that he was just sick of it, right? I mean, he had put out a release before about how the violence and sort of threats against him was really getting to him. And then Trump comes after him on Truth Social. My guess is that probably came with its own set of threats. I think he just finally hit the end and said, it's just not worth it anymore.
Do you feel like this, I mean, we're looking at some of what he was having to absorb from the president on Truth Social. I mean, you can look at this right here. The president saying, Thom Tillis has hurt the great people of North Carolina. He's a talker, a complainer, not a doer. You know, when you're frustrated and you're in Washington, I mean, he even says that, he's been joked by his friends. He hasn't been super excited about running again. Do you blame him, Chris? Do you blame him for making this decision?
I certainly don't blame him, right? I mean, he has every right to not run for office. He's doing it with plenty of lead time for folks in the Republican Party. And I think it's maybe telling that, if we think back just a couple of years ago, we were having, not the same conversation, but a similar one about Patrick McHenry, a guy who had been interim speaker, who, there was at least some talk of him maybe being permanent speaker. Right at the top of his game, he says, you know what, I'm out. It's just too much for me in this environment. I think that says something about our politics, and I think it says something about the value or lack thereof of congressional service in these polarized times.
Well, okay, Chris, before we get to who could possibly take the seat, it's not like Senator Tillis is retiring after the 4th of July. He's got 18 more months. He's going to want to leave a legacy and his fingerprint on certain issues that still affect North Carolinians up in Washington. What do you expect to see from him over these next year and a half?
It's going to be Thom Tillis unplugged, right? I think he even sort of
what's he got to lose?
That's right. He implied as much at the end of his statement, right? He said, that he's looking forward to serving out his term and not having to worry about fundraising and not have to worry about the pressures of reelection. So this is a pretty normal pattern. So folks that study these kinds of things find that once somebody's decided they're retiring, they tend to move a little bit more away from the center of their own party. In other words, we're going to see him unplugged. We're going to see him probably take more of the kind of stances he's been taking over the last couple of weeks, which is to say ones that sometimes, but not always, run counter to President Trump.
Oh, boy. Tillis Unplugged. I'm looking forward to that live concert for the next 18 months in Washington. That will be interesting to see. All right, so the next big question is, now you're eventually going to have this seat, which we know both Democrats and Republicans are going to be working hard to get in that seat. Let's start with the Republicans. We've heard Laura Trump. We've heard a number of names. What are some... Dan Bishop. I mean, what are some names that come to mind on the Republican side who could theoretically take the seat?
Laura Trump, if she wants it, she can have it. She's somebody from North Carolina. She currently lives in Florida, but she has about 60 days, I believe it is, to still move to the state, change her residency. So if she wants it, I think it's probably hers. But the ones that I think are more likely, Michael Whatley, who had been head of the North Carolina Republican Party, then moved on as co-chair of the National Republican Party. His name's been floated. Pat Harrigan, who is a freshman member of Congress, of course. Pat Harrigan, seems to be very popular with the MAGA wing of the party, seems to be popular with some of Trump's folks. I think he's a likely candidate, or at least a possible candidate. Dan Bishop, I think you already mentioned, might be taking a look at it. Greg Murphy, another member of Congress, might be taking a look at it. Those are the folks I think who would be at the top of my list. I saw Brad Knott's name get floated, who's another freshman member of Congress. What's interesting is the Republican side, they got 10 members of Congress say, hey, folks want to get a promotion, right, to the Senate. But a lot of those folks are freshmen. And one of those folks, Virginia Fox, is 81 years old. And I'm guessing probably not wanting to take on a 6-year Senate term. So I think it's a pretty limited list as far as folks looking for the promotion from Congress to the Senate.
Well, Chris, real fast, before I talk about who could be available possible on the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders posted on X yesterday and said, quote, the Republican Party today is a cult. Either you do as Trump wants or you're out. The list you just gave us on the Republican side, they know that Trump's vote holds a lot of weight when it comes to primaries, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Every one of those people I named knows. Certainly Lara Trump knows it. She probably talks about it at the dinner table. You got to figure Michael Whatley he knows it, right? Pat Harrigan knows it, benefited from it in the past. So yeah, I think they do know. What we're talking about is Thom Tillis, love him or hate him or moderate about him. He's a moderate sort of guy. Nobody I just named is a moderate. They are all fully MAGA. And I think that's what we're likely to end up with on the Republican side.
All right, let's go to the Democratic side. Former Governor Roy Cooper, what are some names you're thinking that could take the seat on the Democratic side?
I mean, Roy Cooper, right? This is the old play waiting for Godot. This is waiting for Roy Cooper, right? We're just waiting time after time after time. Is he finally going to say something? So it's his if he wants it. The question is, does he want it? If he doesn't, Wiley Nickel, of course, is already in. Wiley Nickel is a former member of Congress, former state senator from the Triangle area. I've heard Rachel Hunt's name passed around a little bit. That's our current lieutenant governor.
Jeff Jackson,
and then, of course,
maybe?
Exactly. Jeff Jackson is one that I think makes some Democrats drool. He has been sort of quiet about it, at least publicly, but you got to figure if Cooper doesn't get in, he's at least going to give it a hard look.
All right. Now, finally, we know that Senator Thom Tillis had this opposition to Trump's tax bill, the big, beautiful bill. So now I think the question is, what happens? We know that the House was supposed to be on recess this week for 4th of July. Not happening right now. In the next 18 minutes, Chris, the Senate is supposed to start this vote-a-rama with the bill. We know Republicans can only lose 3 members and still clear passage. Let's talk about what happens with this bill, because then it still has to kick back over to the House side.
That's right. And on top of all that, President Trump says he wants this done by the 4th of July. So by the fireworks, time the fireworks go off, He wants this thing done. I don't see that happening, right? I mean, vote-a-rama is going to be crazy today. And as you said very well, even if it gets through the Senate, it still goes back to the House. And it's not going to be an easy path there because the Senate has changed this bill in some small, but I think significant ways. So I truly don't know what's going to happen. They had a hard time even getting it to the floor to have a conversation, much less voting for it in the end.
Well, there's the timeline, as we mentioned. Yeah, if it does make it to the House and passes through the Senate, Chamber won't even take a look at it, possibly Wednesday at the earliest. Then they have to have the debate, then the final passage. All of that certainly is what they're hoping to do before the 4th, and that is coming up before we know it. Well, listen, Chris, thank you for your insight. We're going to be, looking certainly at what happens with, as you say, Unplug Tillis over the next 18 months, and if this passes this week before we get out for the 4th. Thanks for your time today and your insight. We always appreciate it.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.